Hello folks, Trouble T Cat here, recording for the Zombie Arcade as always, and this is going to be my review of Pillars of Eternity, which is a new top-down RPG made by Obsidian Entertainment in the style of the classic late 90s Western RPGs, most notably Baldur's Gate. In fact, the interface and the general appearance of the game takes so many cues from the Infinity Engine that it's kind of ridiculous. This should look pretty familiar to anyone who played those old games. Right off the bat, I'll just say that if you're a fan of Baldur's Gate 1 or Baldur's Gate 2 and you haven't bought this game yet for some reason, just go out and buy it right now. Just go buy it from your retailer of choice. You won't regret it. In very, very short, the writing is at least on par with those games. In my opinion, it's often better, as is the gameplay, the combat. The game doesn't even seem to have Obsidian's traditional boatload of release bugs. It's excellent, and if you liked those games, you will also like this.
Sure.
For those of you who didn't play those games by some cruel twist of fate, I'm talking a little bit more about what the game actually is. The best modern comparison is probably Dragon Age Origins. I didn't actually play Dragon Age 2 or Dragon Age Inquisition, so I can't comment on those games, but the best modern comparison I know of is probably Dragon Age Origins, although it'd be fallacious to say that it's completely similar to that game either. So, essentially, Pillars of Eternity is an RPG in the most traditional sense of Western RPGs anyway. The two main pillars of the game are a strong story and tactical party-based combat. The game also, of course, features exploration, puzzle solving, and naturally, bad loot experience. When it comes to gameplay, unlike old Infinity Engine games or Neverwinter Nights, for example, PoE doesn't use D&D as its mechanical rule set. This makes it a little bit less familiar to people who've been playing these games for a long time, like myself, but in reality, the rule set the game uses it's quite similar to D&D, and the ultimate feel of battles is a lot like Baldur's Gate. They can be fast-paced, and characters can die very, very quickly, but don't let that fool you. This is not an action game. The pause button is always there as your friend. There's also a new sort of slow motion mode in Pillars of Eternity, which is a really good feature. But I find myself not using it that much and instead relying on pausing every few seconds in combat, much like I would have done in Baldur's Gate in order to give orders. If you don't take advantage of good positioning and a wide variety of utility items and spells and stuff like that at your disposal, you're going to have a very, very bad day, at least on the normal difficulty. There are also lots of these other sort of cool bits and pieces. You know, the character creation system kind of helps you build up a backstory for your character that actually gets reacted to in-game, so I really like that. And there are also some pretty interesting classes that feel a little bit different from anything, well, I won't say that they're 100% completely nothing like this has ever been done before, but there's just some stuff in there that's a little bit different, feels a little bit fresh and interesting, like the Chanter class, for example.
How may I help?
You set up these chants that the guy sings in combat, and each phrase of the chant gives a different sort of area of effect, either a buff to your party or a debuff for the enemy generally, and then after a certain number of phrases have been chanted, the dude can cast a big powerful spell. So like that's a cool sort of system. It's a little bit different from sort of standard class RPG tropes, and there's a few other classes like that as well. There's all these systems set up around building up your character's stronghold. It's not I don't consider this a spoiler because it happens very early in the game. You end up, and also you can see the little button there for it on the interface from the very beginning of the game. You end up getting your own castle, but it's sort of fucked up, and you gotta sort of build that up. And there's all these systems around that really help flesh the game out. And just in general, I'd say the game feels very fleshed out, and also it brings enough new ideas to the table, I think, that although it certainly plays a lot on the nostalgia I feel for Baldur's Gate, and I should say, you know, this is going to be a pretty glowing review, as you can probably tell at this point. A lot of that, I think, does come from my nostalgia for those older games. That's not all there is to it, but that's got to be a factor. You know, I absolutely loved Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and I have really strong memories of playing those when I was younger. So that's certainly influences the review. But I honestly think that even that aside, I would be really, really enjoying this game as an RPG. That said, the game it's distinctly old school in its design, and there might be people who aren't open to that. It's certainly got... There's a lot of action, like when you get into a dungeon, you'll sort of go through and you'll be solving puzzles and fighting dudes, and that'll all be coming at you quite quickly, relatively speaking. So there's a lot of action when you're inside dungeons, but overall the game has a more sedate pace than I think some people are going to necessarily want. There might be people who aren't open to that kind of old school design, but I think those people would be really missing out on something if you let the fact that the game is a little bit slower than maybe some modern games and its design is a little bit more old school stop you. I think you're missing something out here that's really good. I'm not even close to finishing the game. I've played for 15 hours or so, which is... In any other game, you'd be saying, like, 15 hours, you played a lot, you must understand pretty well and know a lot about the game and stuff, but not so much here. I certainly feel like I've played enough at this point to be making this review, because I don't think there's much chance that my opinion of the game is going to change over the course of the rest of the game, so I'm comfortable making a review. But it does mean there's stuff that I don't yet know about the story and things like that. Anyway... I've so far found encounters to be well balanced and dungeons to be pretty cool. I'm playing on the normal difficulty with expert mode, which is this mode which hides a lot of sort of gamey assists that weren't present in the old games. Like, you know how like in Mass Effect when there's like a dialogue option you can't pick, you can see that it's there and it's like, you need more Paragon or Renegade or whatever to be able to pick this option. By default, this game has something like that in there. But you play on expert mode, you don't see it, and I think that people should play on expert mode, because in a game like this where a lot of it's about role playing and about immersing in the world, having those gamey elements shoved in your face all the time kind of ruins the experience for me. And I think there's a good reason a lot of old games are more opaque. And I'm really glad that they have the expert mode option in there to make the game as opaque as I'm accustomed to. But if you're not used to these kinds of older sort of styles of games, or if you prefer if you prefer less opacity in your games and you want more stuff to be exposed, because that's the new school of game design thought, there's a lot about that in there, then you can play not with expert mode. But I strongly recommend it. I think it's a really good idea. I found the combat to be pretty challenging on normal. I tried hard mode for a while, but it was too tricky for me, guys. I wasn't pro enough. So that's good. I like the way that's all balanced. As for the story and writing, I can't really comment on the overarching storyline as a whole, since I've only seen the beginning of it, but what I can say is that a lot of the micro-stories, companions' backstories, the histories of areas, side quest storylines, the stories behind dungeons and stuff like that you find, have been quite interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where the main plot line goes. Additionally, the writing itself is really, really good, and I don't mean just the writing is good for a video game, which you see a lot these days. I mean the writing is good. There's a lot of reading you're going to be doing over the course of the game, but it's not a problem because the quality of the writing is such that that's a pleasure instead of a burden. Not everything's voice acted, I'll just say there. Like, there is actually, unlike Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, quite a lot of the dialogue is voice acted, maybe about 80% or so.
Does it.
So you don't actually have to read that much. You have to read descriptions and character emotes and stuff like that comes along with the dialogue, but most of the actual speech so far has been voice acted. That said, if you're one of those people who absolutely hates reading, I guess this game's not for you. I always thought that was kind of a shitty attitude to have, just in general. I can't be bothered reading shit, fuck you.
Of course.
I don't know.
Yes.
But whatever, if you're one of those ADD kids or like borderline illiterate or whatever and you just can't deal with reading, then I guess you probably won't want to play this game. as I said, for me, reading the descriptions and stuff like that is, I like it. It's well written. I think it's much better written than almost any RPG that is fully voiced. The exception might be like The Witcher 2 is also really well written, and that's fully voiced. But The Witcher 2, you know, there's quite a lot of dialogue in that, but I think you'd find it to be a fair bit less than in this game. Even. It's really unfortunate. The quality of the voice acting is actually fairly low. It kind of sucks, but yeah, that's all right. Somebody's just started mowing the lawn outside. So, of course, it's too loud in here. I guess I should mention the presentation of the game before we finish up here. As you can see, the game uses like 3D characters on 2D backgrounds. It doesn't look amazing, I'm not gonna lie, but I think it looks nice. Particularly the backgrounds. Some of the backgrounds look really good. I find that the way the characters look and stuff is not great, and at first, the sort of 3D characters on the 2D backgrounds I found a little bit jarring, but it stopped bothering me pretty quickly. I'm not gonna like lie and be like the game looks amazing or whatever. I find the backgrounds well drawn, they're nice, but it doesn't look great. You're not buying this game for the graphics, though. Anyway, you know that's not the point. The sound effects are fine. I have no complaints about that. The music reminds me a lot of Baldur's Gate, which is a nice sort of nostalgia trip for me. The music is probably the music's good. I don't have a whole lot to say about the presentation. It's fine. So overall, I mean, the game, I really strongly recommend this game to anybody who's a fan of old school Western RPGs, or people who maybe didn't play those games, but who are interested in, you know, a game with more sort of tactical combat and with a focus on story, with maybe a more sedate pace, being okay with that. The only people I would categorically not recommend this to are the kinds of people who only play action games or only play shooters, including people who, like, if your idea of a perfect RPG is Diablo, then this game is probably not for you, in the sense that it's much slower paced, much stronger emphasis on story. The combat is much more tactical. So if you don't like that kind of RPG, if you've played games like this before and you didn't like them, this game won't change your mind. And if you're just not open to this kind of experience, then I wouldn't recommend it to you. But if this is something you're going to be, you know, possibly interested in, I have very little bad to say about it. You know, there are things that could be more impressive, like the graphics, for example, but that's not a huge detriment to the game, since the game's not about graphics. You know, it's fine. Some people won't like the more old school design. It's very hard for me to not give this. I'm trying to find more negatives to bring up to make this review feel a bit more balanced, but I think, you know, there's some stuff like the inventory system. I'm not an enormous fan of the like, you have a small inventory on your characters, and then you have a stash that you shove items into, and I'm not an enormous fan of that, but it works, you know, well enough. I preferred having to do weight management in Baldur's Gate and stuff like that, so I kind of... That feature's gone. You can carry an infinite amount of crap. You can shove stuff into your stash. You can only access that when you camp, so it's sort of balanced, but I kind of liked the weight management aspect. But that's something that I think most people... Like, that's something where it's me having a nitpicky thing that I would prefer to be a different way about the game, where I think most people would say that Pillars of Eternity does it better than the old school games. I think most people would say that the weight management didn't add much to Baldur's Gate, and the current system with the stash is better. So, you know, a lot of my nitpicky kind of complaints like that I could bring up to have more negatives in this review are things that I think are concessions to make the game appeal better to not a stupider audience, but a more modern audience with more modern game design sensibilities. And I'm kind of coming to realize that that's not always a terrible thing. It's, as an old school kind of guy in terms of what I like from games, it's easy for me to bitch about things being modernized or dumbed down in franchises that I have a lot of love for, but I have to admit that a lot of times that's probably because it goes against my nostalgia, and probably the modern way does overall improve the game. So I can't complain too much about stuff like that. I don't think. I don't think it's good in a review to complain too much about those kinds of things. Where it's not necessarily ideal to me, but it is probably overall actually better for the game. So yes, the game's a great nostalgia trip. Yes, but it also brings enough to the table in its own right in terms of new stuff, like the classes that I mentioned before, the sort of stronghold system, that it's more, it goes beyond just being a nostalgia trip. I really like it. I want to finish I was playing it before I recorded 20 minutes of footage. You'll notice I'm not doing a whole lot of editing, and that's because I wrote this review and I want to make this video quickly so I can get back to playing the game. Comes very strongly recommended to pretty much anyone.
I'll get it open.
As I've explained. So, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time, Trouble T Cat out.